Rising up, back on the streets. Took my time, took my chances on Breakfast with Bob.
Poncho Man, everybody! We are brought to you by HOKA, by Polar, by UCAN, Velofix, Normatec, Active Canyon, Form Goggles, Amp Human. Our championship edition will be at Four Seasons Resort Hualalai, where we'll be having a special evening with Dave Scott and Mark Allen on Thursday night. And this is our 10th anniversary here at Huggo's on the Rocks. How about a round of applause for the legends, the two six-time Ironman world champions, Dave Scott and Mark Allen. We even have an audience now.
Well,
I like that, right?
It's great to have like 3,000 people out there
Isn't
watching.
it great? It's the best.
How did you fit all 3,000 in this little space? It's amazing.
It's pretty special. It's really, really special. 30th anniversary. Man, you guys are old.
What, Bob?
Of what?
Yeah.
Of your favorite race of all time?
That's not mine. Let's go back a few years. We've talked enough about 89. I said to Mark this morning, let's talk about 87 or 84.
I would like 87 was a good one. That's the one where Mark ended up in the hospital. You like that one a lot.
Well, the outcome, as everyone knows here in the audience on 89, if you take them back into time.
Let's go back into time.
No, we don't have to. I'm kidding. We can talk about 89. You're the boss.
I'm the boss. That doesn't happen very often. Okay, so back to 89.
Yes.
Now, when you guys, first time you met Mark, was it during the race here?
Let me think about that. I think it was 1981, but I know, no, in 82.
82.
And that Mark had mechanical trouble. We were about near Kauai, and his derailleur dismantled, and I just said, sorry, see you later. And that was our first introduction.
Really?
But I knew this guy was going to come back.
Because he had just won that Horny Toe Triathlon. But they knew so little about you on ABC. I think they even had your last name spelled wrong. Right? It was Allan on the chyron at the bottom because nobody really knew who Mark Allen was. They knew Dave Scott. He had won the race.
Yeah, and actually, we had really never spoken. You know, I knew who he was because Dave was a legend back in 1982. He'd won the race once. He was trying to win his second title, which he did with the fastest swim, bike, and run on the day. I mean, impressive, right? So, jeez, how am I going to beat that? But anyway, we're heading back toward Kauai, and I figured, never talked to him before. Perfect time for an introduction, you know. And so I pedaled up next to him, and I'm thinking, what's the stupidest thing I can say to this guy? And so I go, hey, Dave, when we're done with the bike, you want to go for a run?
No, that was pretty crafty, actually, Mark.
His response was less than, oh, brother, you know. So anyway.
That's when he put in a big sprocket and took off, and that's when your derailleur fell off.
Yeah. My race was done. I shouldn't have talked to him.
So then you come back to town. Would you get a cab, get back to town? Or a truck out there?
You have to understand, 1982, there's no cell phones.
Nothing.
There's no anybody. And so I'm standing on the side of the road. My derailleur had broke. It was stuck in the biggest gear, and I thought, I can't make it all the way back with this. And I don't have a wallet, of course. And so anyway, out goes the thumb, and a guy in a pickup truck stopped, took me all the way back to transition. So if you're out there and you remember that, thank you.
That is great.
It's a long time ago, Mark.
It was.
We actually met, or maybe we didn't meet. It was earlier in the year. They had the USTS series, correct? 1982.
Yeah, June.
In San Diego.
Yep. Yeah, and that was after the February '82 race, because of the Julie's Crawl, all of a sudden they added a second Ironman that year in October and created the United States Triathlon Series, where that first event in San Diego, first place was Dave Scott, second place was Scott Molina, third place was Scott Tinley, and fourth place was a guy named Mark Allen, who learned something about himself that day because you got passed and dropped back to fifth, and when you were a swimmer, if someone passed you, you basically gave up. But this new sport was different for you.
Yeah, I came off the bike in fourth place. A guy, Dale Basescu, who's passed recently, ran by me, and so my swimmer tape was going, oh, this guy pulled ahead. He's going to get fourth. I'm going to get fifth at worst, or even worse. And something just relaxed in me and said, you know what? I got passed, but maybe I can catch back up. And I ended up catching him and going on and finishing in 4th place. And yeah, Dave actually brought this race up. We didn't talk, but he brought it up because he was the winner on that day.
Yeah,
so.
yes, he did. He won the first ever United States Triathlon Series race, because when people say Dave Scott's the Ironman guy, back then you had to be everything. You couldn't just be an Ironman guy. There was one race, right? So there was Olympic distance. There really wasn't 70.3. You had to be well-rounded, right, Dave?
Well, I think you didn't want to be idle for too long. I'd get too chubby, so there was kind of a eclectic mix of different races. And that first one in San Diego actually was a 2K swim, and I think it was 50 kilometers on the bike, and wasn't it 15K
run?
So a little bit longer. It was a nice, a nice distance, not as long as the distance that Mark dominated in Nice, and certainly not Ironman. So we kind of did a cross section of races, and it was the early emergence of the sport.
The cool thing was that right from the beginning, when you came over in 1980 and won, there was something about not just Oahu, but this island as well, that worked well for you. And for Mark, Nice and all sorts of other events around the world worked well for him. But this didn't work well for Mark. And was there a point where, where every year when you came in, was he the guy you were looking at? Or was there, those Tinley was there, and Mark really was 84, where he really established himself as somebody who could win this race?
Well, let's not diffuse the talent to my left here. I was cognizant of Mark all the time, and Scott Tinley, and of course Scott Molina, which became the Big Four.
Yes.
I was always aware of their talent level, and there were years where all 4 of us were really on, and Scott Molina was invincible at one time in the Olympic distance races. So at any time that we collided in the races, there certainly was mutual respect and admiration, and I better be wary of these guys because they're ready to race. And there wasn't an intimidation factor. I think coming to Hawaii, which you alluded to, I came out here in 1976 and did in 77 did the Waikiki rough water swim. So I was familiar with the distance. That was on Oahu. And I just loved Hawaii right off the bat. I did the Maui Lanai Channel swim, and I said, wow, the energy here is great. And coming from a swimming background, swimming really wasn't my strength over time. It became the bike and the run and the Ironman distance. But I always felt this envelope of energy when I came to Hawaii, and I felt that a long time ago. That was 1976. 80 was my debut in Ironman in Oahu, and just carried it over here to the Big Island.
When I look at the rivalry that became Dave Scott and Mark Allen, probably the signature event was 84, when Mark had the 13-minute lead, and you come out of transition, and people are already figuring, and I'm sure Mark was figuring, this race is over. I've got a big lead. I'm planning my acceptance speech. I'm going to win this race.
Yeah, 1984 here on the Big Island, it was my 3rd Ironman. The first year I didn't finish because of the derailleur break. The next year I got 3rd place. In 84, I thought, all right, here we go, right? And I was really, really, really excited about the bike ride because I'd been biking pretty strong that year, and so I ended up just kind of going off the front and I wasn't really thinking clearly, let's say. I was just like, Arr! And, Ironman has a way of taking and turning it into, oh, no. And, I had a 12-and-a-half-minute lead off the bike. Dave was, that sounded like there's no way Dave Scott or anybody is going to catch me. And at that time, the transition area was way at the far end of town. And so you had a 10K through town with just, thousands of people cheering. And I was high-fiving, and, half the people were saying, go Mark, and the other half were saying, go Dave, because they figured if the guy was in the lead, had to be Dave Scott. They didn't know who I was, right? Which fired me up even more, I have to admit. And at the bottom of Pawnee Road Hill, I thought, I have got this thing. And at the top of the hill, I felt like all the gas had run out of my tank. And you make that left-hand turn onto the Queen K, and it's desolate, it's isolated, you're alone, you're solo, there's no fans cheering, and all of a sudden I remembered, oh, wait a minute, I'm in the Ironman, I'm not in a 10K, and I've got 20 miles to go. And I knew it was just a matter of time before I ended up having to walk. And so I would walk, and I'd run, and I'd walk, and I'd run. And, when you are walking the marathon, there is no way that a guy like this who's running isn't going to catch you, you know. And so he caught me, and he went by, and I'm trying to finish this thing. And at one point, the medical team must have thought I probably looked pretty bad, because they came up to me and they go, "We need to ask you some questions." And this is one of the aid stations that I was walking through, which were quite a few of them. And they go, "What's your name?" And I go, "Mark Allen." And they go, "Well, what are you doing?" I'm in the Ironman." And they go, "What day is it?" And I'm sitting there thinking, is it Saturday or Sunday? And I thought, if I get this question wrong, this answer wrong, I'm out of the race. And I go, "It doesn't matter, just let me go." I must have been convincing, because they let me finish.
Yeah. So, Dave, in that same race, when you come out of transition, you know a guy's 12 and a half, 13 minutes ahead. What are you thinking?
I mean, it was an interesting day, and I think a lot of people's psychology changes throughout this race. We've talked a lot about this, and we chatted about it this morning. But Mark took off on that first half of the bike and up to Javi, 12 and a half minutes, as you both stated. Over the last couple of miles into Javi, I was getting a split, as probably Mark was, and it stayed the same. I said, thank goodness he's not putting on another 5 minutes on the climb. On the way back, it stayed the same. So we had the same bike splits from Javi home.
Right.
And I was encouraged by that. I said, he had this monumental lead. Can I make this up? And I didn't want to do the math. My mind was actually working like maybe there's hope. But with that huge lead, I said, wow, let's just see if I can keep taking some chunks out of it. And, as Mark said, his allies are out there telling him what that split differential is. I'm getting the same thing. And all of a sudden it was down to 8 minutes. Pretty quickly, and I thought, well, maybe Mark is having trouble, and there might be a chance to catch him. And right at the moment where ABC caught that pass, I didn't know if Mark was walking prior to that, because as I was coming up on him, I said, well, I'm going to catch him, and he just started walking. So, it was a lucky day in a lot of ways, because Mark really had a dominating bike ride. No one could stay with him. He just took off. 12 minutes and 56 miles is astronomical, but that day I prevailed.
So when you look back at this, Dave, obviously you've won 6 times, but what do you look at as your best race here?
I think it's difficult to measure how a race qualifies, and it's really over time. It's certainly not something that when Mark and I were racing '89 that this was my greatest race. I look at, obviously the time we brought it down. It was a historic race. We were side by side. When I look over time of what you value, and I think what you value in a race is the emotional side that still is imprinted in your brain and your psyche and your aura. And I don't want to sound too fluffy with it, but I look back at that '89 race, and I had full intention of coming back in '90 or '91. Mark dominated. And I was kind of injured, and my 2 boys, one was born in '89, 30 years ago. He was 2 months old. I saw him out here on Elite Drive, and Mark and I are running together. That's Ryan. And then my other one was born, and then there was a 5-year lapse. So getting to your question, Bob.
Yeah.
In 1994, I was 40, and I didn't really have any huge premonition or optimism, maybe. Was still pretty high, but I didn't know what would transpire 5 years later after we had this battle. And I had been out of this, professional realm in this sport. So coming back in '94, coming in second behind Greg Welch, I hated to lose. It was a great day. And then I just mentioned this. I'll mention it briefly. The one that really probably has the greatest imprint on me, because I was struggling, as Mark did in the first 6 races over here. He couldn't put it together, yet he was dominant around the world. And I was dominant here, so I always came over this race and said, well, I'm going to have a good day. This was now '96. I was 42. And, I felt deep down inside that I had a possibility of winning. I was second in '94. But it was just a catastrophic day for me on the swim, bad bike, and I kind of rallied on the run. We chatted this morning about it to the AWA athletes. I didn't know it at the time. I thought I was in 50th place off the bike. I was in 26th, and I ran up to 5th. So a lot of ways, because it was my last one, and I struggled mentally, like a lot of you that are in the audience may have periods where you kind of fight with yourself I use this word a lot. I feel like you have different opportunities throughout the race where you can switch your mind on or off, and you have a choice to make that. And it's really kind of what you, not I should have done this or I could have done that. What can you do right now? What, the spontaneity of the moment.
Yes.
Do what you can do at the moment, and you can turn it around. And I did that year on the run, and I was grateful for a 5th place, which was really first place in my eyes.
And a 2:45 marathon off the bike. That was pretty damn impressive. About a round of applause for Dave Scott on that. And Grip, for you, sort of reversing trends. 84, you've got the big lead. So in 95, you've got the big deficit. And you were in Dave Scott's shoes. And now you had to run down an Uber cyclist who was like a young Mark Allen, Thomas Hellriegel, who put, 13 and a half, 14 minutes on you. And you had to sort of keep your head together. And do you look at that as maybe your crowning achievement here, especially his last one here?
There's many ways to look at what's your most crowning achievement, and certainly race results are one of them. Everybody has heard about 1989. Everybody's probably heard a lot about 1995 when Thomas Hellriegel was 13 and a half minutes ahead off the bike, and I was finally able to catch him at mile 23 of the marathon. That's a whole story in itself.
Right.
But the reason that Dave and I are here together is that this is the 30th anniversary of our epic day together. I don't even want to call it a battle because, that battle is actually something that each of us had to overcome throughout the year. For both of us to get in the kind of shape that we needed to be in, the decisions that we had to make throughout the year, the challenges that we had to overcome, they were monumental. And I think as both of us have reflected back over these last 30 years, we realized there were a lot of pieces that could have gone one way or another that really we wouldn't have even shown up at the start line. There was, after 1988, I had a disastrous 3 flat, fifth place finish. I was done with Ironman. I wasn't even going to line up at the start line. That got turned around halfway in early August. I was at a swim workout in the pool in Boulder, Colorado. I got out of the water. I passed out, hit my head on the toilet, and I thought, I'm not going to Ironman. I'm out. I don't know what's going on, what it's doing to my body. So, these details are something that both Dave and I have been highlighting in stories this year.
Right.
That was the concept came from Scott Zagarino, who maybe some of you might not know his name. He's been involved with just about every aspect of the sport since the early 80s. He's my business partner in my Mark Allen coaching. He came to me and said, look, you guys have an opportunity here to really, I know both of your stories because he's known us forever. And he said, there's so many things that you guys did that you had to overcome just to get to that start line, and you should share those stories together. And so we're writing 10 detailed stories about all the different events that happened throughout 1989. You can read them on 1989thestory.com. And we're up to story number 7. There's 3 more to go. This week's is we've toned it down a little bit because we want Ironman and the race this week to take front stage, but then the final 2 in those last 2 weeks, every Thursday, last 2 weeks after Kona, you got to read those stories because you're going to hear some stuff that you have never heard before. But anyway, so that, to bring it all the way back to your question, those stories, 1989thestory.com. The greatest thing for me is just how personally I was able to turn so many events in my life around when I wanted to quit throughout the year to even get to the start line. And I think that's something that a lot of people forget, is that the race is one day, but your journey to get there can be a year or 2 years or 5 years.
A lot of years.
And it's all the richness that you experience in your training and with your training partners, and the challenges that you do face that you have to overcome that make it such a fulfilling thing to line up on that start line and just finally be going, I'm here, let me give it what I can. And 1989, we gave it mostly what we had, right?
Well, you took 18 minutes off the course record. Come on. Dave took 18 minutes off the course record and lost. That says a lot. 809, 810, 240, 241. That's pretty special.
Yeah, but it's not an I win and Dave lost situation.
The sport won.
The sport won, because before that, there was one person who came to this race who knew you could race it, and I'm sitting next to him. The rest of us, we were thinking, okay, the guy who's going to win is the guy who slows down the least.
Yes.
You know, we didn't have the mindset like you can race from start to finish. 1989 elevated that expectation
No
in
question.
everybody's mind, and what showed that from the starting gun till the closing step across that finish line, this is a race, and perhaps the greatest race in endurance sports ever.
Love that. How about a round of applause for the grip? So Thursday night, Mark and Dave and myself and Alistair Brownlee, who is an Ironman rookie and might get a little information from the legends. But we're going to be out of Four Seasons doing a very special evening, and you can go online and check that out because I think we still have some seats available for that. But Grip, when you said there were times throughout your career that when you came here, you were afraid of this guy, right? You're afraid of distance. You're afraid of Dave Scott, and Dave. Just from the years we've talked about, 1989, there was always still sort of raw. It was like, I know you still wanted to win that race. Have you guys over time been able? You're able to chat with each other now and spend time together. How long was it before you guys could talk about this stuff and share these stories?
29 years.
It was 29 years. I love that. 29 years. I mean, listen, I'd run into you guys at the grocery store like before this race, and it'll be like 5 years after the race, and you guys would sort of go around each other, and it was like they'd go down different aisles. There was just something there. There was a tension. I remember 87 sitting at the press conference. You guys were like this close to each other and never made eye contact. I mean, there was a little. It was hard for you guys to be friends when you're trying to beat the other guy.
Well, I think that's the nature of competition and the level that we were at and
Right.
the notoriety of this race. We weren't giving soft hugs to each other, Bob. I don't know what you were expecting, but you don't see that in any rivalry. Tennis, you
Right.
don't see that, but. There was certainly mutual respect and
question.
admiration, and I was very cognizant of Mark's potential ability. And as Mark alluded to in this 89story.com, where we kind of unveiled our thoughts throughout the year, we also collided throughout the year. But again, we weren't buddies back then. But I knew when Mark stepped up to the starting line in 89. And I had a strategy. Mark had a strategy, which is unveiled in this storyline. That if we were together, this is what I'm going to do. And he had a very close, similar type of line. So,
yes.
That part of it, I think, in reflecting back, and we didn't really talk about this until we had an interview with you, Bob.
Yep.
I think it was LA Tri Club 2004. So now it's 15 years later, and that's really the first time that I heard a little bit from Mark during the race, and I said, really, this went on, this happened, but now it's 15 years later, and we're really putting the pen to paper and kind of divulging, and I think also divulging not just about the race, but the vulnerabilities that everyone has, and I think that's maybe the human side. We come over here and we're six-time Ironman champion, and boy, every time you stepped on the island, you performed well, and that's nonsense. We were vulnerable in a lot of ways, like everyone else, and I think bringing yourself up to compete at a high level, you kind of turn on the right spark plug so that you hopefully can do that. And that particular day, we did have quite a race.
Love it. How about a round of applause for the two legends, Mark Allen, Dave Scott, Poncho Man. Take us out.
So many times it happens so fast. You turn your passion to glory on Breakfast with Bob.
And Poncho Man is a legend.
Yeah, Poncho Man.